Alright, so this is my plumb bob here, and I've used lots of different... Alright, so this here is my plumb bob, and I've used lots of different lathe techniques to make this plumb bob. The first technique I used was facing, and that was to get this flat edge along here, and how I did that was just by putting it in the lathe and just running the machine alongside it, taking off about 1/2 mil just so I had a smooth face. Another technique I used was angled turning, and that was how I got this bevel here. And to do that, I would get the top part of the lathe and angle it to 30 degrees so that when it ran along this spinning metal, it would make it put an angle on it. The final technique I used to make this was tapping. Now, what I did with tapping was I used the lathe to drill a hole in the end there, and then I used a tap in the vise to tap the hole so I could put a screw in the hole. The sort of trades that would use a lathe would mostly be a fitter and turner, because they need to make some very precise parts, and the lathe is one of the most precise machines you can get. Another trade that might use this would also maybe be a boiler maker as well, when they need to just fabricate a small metal part that needs to be precise. And really any other trade that just requires something that needs to be circular and have a precise size to it so it can fit in whatever part they need it for. Right, now to properly use the lathe, we'll find this main power switch on the back, which will turn on to give the lathe power. And if we want to change the speed that our lathe spins at, we can use these knobs here to change the gears. So for example, if I want to have my RPM at 770, what I'll do is I'll set this one here to C, as that corresponds with C. And then I'll set it to the blue one here, which is that corresponds with 770. So we'll just click that there. And what we'll do is we'll just spin the chuck just to make sure it's properly in gear. That's all good. Now we'll close this, as the lathe won't spin unless this is down. And to start the lathe, we'll pull this lever out and down, lock it in place, and now the lathe is spinning. So this here is the lathe setup I used. You can see these are the knobs that you can use to precisely adjust where the lathe is. Some tools I used was this is the chuck key here. That goes in there just to tighten or loosen the chuck. Here's a square drive bit which uses to tighten or loosen the bolt here on the cutting edge. Another tool I used here was the marking gauge. What I would do is use the blue glue and put it on my metal, and then I would turn it on this marking gauge so that it would leave a line, a precise line of where I wanted to cut to. The main skills I've used when using the lathe in terms of fitting and turning skills was just how to mark out metal to a precise size and then spin it down on a lathe to get it to that precise size. Another very important skill I learned was how to use a vernier caliper, and that's very important as you need to be able to check precise measurements, and that's the most precise tool that you can use for doing that. I can apply these skills to become a machinist, as I'll be able to make very precise objects and things that'll need to fit a very precise size, and so being able to know these skills will become very useful when being a machinist. Before doing this task, I had pretty much no experience using a lathe. I'd used it once or twice, but I'd never really understood what all of the things would do and how to use all of the functions, and now I do. And I don't think I would, I might be a machinist when I'm older, but at the moment it's not really the type of metalwork I enjoy doing, as I don't like doing as precise work. I like to be doing a lot larger things. I think the only area I need to improve on is with my measuring, because I just need to be able to check the measurements for things to make sure they're really perfect, otherwise the part won't do its job. I applied my work health and safety knowledge while doing this to know which were the right things to do and which weren't. Firstly, I'd always wear my safety glasses, and I'd always wear a shirt that was not too loose so it would get caught in the machine. Another thing I did was not wear any gloves, because if you're operating something spinning and you're wearing gloves, there's a chance your glove could get stuck in the machine and rip your fingers off maybe. I also always use steel cap boots in case I dropped any heavy metal objects on my feet, wouldn't damage my toes. The SACE capability that I used the most throughout this was critical and creative thinking. as I always needed to be able to come up with creative solutions to my problems and think of the best way to do things.